which we have a picture of on the screen, heard a rapping in the wall, and then they called out the name of Mr. Splitfoot and asked him to copy the number of fingers that one of the girls raised. Quickly, 3 raps came from the wall, and communication with supposedly the dead began. Within a short time, there were over 1,200 mediums in New York. And then before the end of the year, the movement of spiritualism, or contact with the dead, took place all over the globe on every major continent. It was the moving of Lucifer towards his final deception to take the human race into deception. In this next slide, ancient wisdom revived is a term that is applied to the teaching of theosophy. A revival of the ancient occult again just after the movement of the Fox sisters began. In Vermont, a couple of men by the name of the Eddy brothers were carrying on tremendous seances where on stage they would go into a trance and demonic spirits would manifest, appearing to be people who once lived in the past. Some of the wealthiest in society came to see the Eddy brothers' performances. On this next slide is a man by the name of Alcott. He was a lawyer and very interested in proving that the phenomenon of spiritualism, or contact with the dead, was wrong. So he went to the home of the Eddy brothers, he observed the phenomenon, and then he tried to find out where the trap doors were. He crawled under the house, knocked on the walls. He discovered that there was something real happening there, and the rest of his life was dedicated to the subject of spiritualism. While he was there, he met a Russian seer or psychic by the name of Helena Blavatsky. She had once been a Christian and left it and went into the worship of the occult. She studied in Egypt and in India, and now she was there helping the Eddy brothers. Together, these two went back to England, and they started what was called the Theosophy Society. In the 1870s, she believed that beings from the spirit world that she called the secret masters were giving her a body of knowledge that was to be revealed to the world. A union not only of occult history through the centuries, which would include every major religion, but a union of spiritualism now and science and philosophies to reach the great minds of the world. This accumulation of data that came from the spirit world was called Isis Unveiled, and laid a foundation for a whole new age of spiritualism, but now acceptable to the upper classes. The lady that you see on the picture now is a lady by the name of Mary Besant, who joined that organization and brought with it her interest in social reform. It was here that we see the seed of the passive social movements that have affected our world today. Everything from women's liberation to civil rights had its birth in the work that she did in India in raising up the Indian people to overthrow their British overlords who were Christians. At this same time, a continuous, slow-moving but powerful international conspiracy was developing. It had begun in the middle of the 18th century with a man by the name of Adam Weishaupt. But in the middle of the 19th century, with the grand movement of spiritualism moving into every facet of society, the man on the picture here, a man by the name of Albert Pike, one of the greatest geniuses of the occult, who spoke and wrote in 16 languages fluently, hired by the federal government of the United States after he had fought as a general in the southern states in the Civil War. He was placed over an army of Indian nations, and he rapidly learned all their languages and was well acquainted with the secrets of their religion. Binding them together is the most terrifying army the world had ever seen. creating atrocities that resulted in the European nations interfering with the U.S. government, telling them that they had to disband this Indian army. This man, who had the capacity to bind those Indian nations together, entered into the highest ranks of Masonry and formed a new society that was called the New and Reformed Palladium Rite. He became the Grand Pope of Masonry and international conspiracy. It was this man, Albert Pike, that planned the destruction of the world in 3 world wars, and his writings can be read today. The plans were simply this: to open up Israel in the First World War for migration. In the Second World War, to work out things for it to become a state, and between the Second and Third World War, this occult conspiracy to dominate the world laid this terrible plan: to build up the state of Israel financially and militarily, and to build up the Arab nations. And then when they reached an apex and balance of power, and the world was lined up on either side of the issue, to create incidents of war in that part of the world, to result in a great cataclysm. And in his own words, the purpose was to cause a great cataclysm, a great final war that would destroy both Christianity and absolute atheism. And the masses, discouraged with either one of these, would then turn to the truth, the religion of Lucifer. He made it clear to the people that Lucifer was a god that the people worshiped without any fear, without any superstition, that he was the brother of Jesus, he taught. But Lucifer had been lied about and maligned by Jesus, who they believed was the ruler of the dark side of the force, the evil god. And that one day in the future the Christians would be destroyed, and Luciferianism, this religion of light as they called it, would rule the whole world. This is at the apex of the entire movement of Lucifer today. The book that you see on the screen, Morals and Dogma by Pike, was written to give us an idea, or was written for Masons in each level of initiation up to the 32nd degree. Above the 32nd degree, it'll take up to 15 years, thousands of dollars, and traveling around this world to special retreats for instruction to get to the 33rd degree. Most people believe there's only 33 degrees, but now we know from study that there's degrees up to the 90th degree. Aleister Crowley was a 90th degree Mason, and he started the Rosicrucian Society in San Jose, indicating a close union. A friend of mine became a Rosicrucian, and one of the first things when he was initiated that he learned was that he would very soon be met by something called the White Brotherhood, who would teach him the mysteries, the secrets of the spirit world. Very soon he found out what it was. The Great White Brotherhood was the spirit world, and in his dreams he was taught the secrets of the occult. Supposedly Masonry claims that its purpose is to teach the consoling doctrine of the immortality of the soul. So in history, we have a number of converging movements. You have the public movement of spiritualism, the revival of witchcraft. At the same time, you have the Theosophy Society, merging it with the scientific and philosophical world. And then you have behind the scenes, underneath, a tremendous international movement to bind the whole world together under the worship of Lucifer. And I read you the prophecies that at the end of time, the spirits of devils would go forth to the kings of the world and bind them together to war against God. But remember what we had read, that Lucifer will manifest himself as the angel of light or truth. It could be your local church that's leading you down the path to hell, and you wouldn't even know it because you assume that it's truth. Anytime you run into teachings, philosophies, or theologies, or manifestations that are based upon the idea that man has an immortal soul, you're holding hands with the devil, no matter how nice and good the philosophy seems. The movement of this into scientific circles began to take place towards the end of the 19th century. The picture on the screen shows a number of people who are elite in society and scientists. These folks believed that everything that could be seen by the senses must be true. They had early on rejected the Bible as the answer to what was happening in our world. And they believed that Genesis was basically just a